And I can't start laughing because sometimes I do when I describe the bad stuff. It's a weird reaction I get sometimes.
I'm the same, so hopefully
I'm
we
like,
might just both be inappropriately laughing at stuff. It was so terrible. That is terrible. Hello, everyone. I am so excited. I have Liz CARLSON here with me today. Liz is not only a health blogger, but also herself has lived with and fully recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME. So this is just a fantastic opportunity to have you with us here today. So welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for being here.
yeah, and I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, Raelan. And I was once watching recovery videos myself, and I was hoping I'd be able to share my story one day. And I'm here. So I'm really
Oh,
happy about that.
it's exciting. You're actually in the Bay Area in California as well, which I am also.
Yeah.
And always just a quick reminder that Liz and I today are just sharing our own experiences living with and recovering from ME/CFS. This is, of course, not to be considered professional advice. All right, so why don't we just dive right in? It would be great if you could tell us a little bit about your story.
So I got ME/CFS not too long after my 30th birthday. I had it for 3 years, and I've been recovered for over a year now. And I'm 34 now, for the record. In my late 20s, I was killing myself at work, but I was also a lover of life. I danced in front of my mirror every single night. And I was the life of the party. But my entire life, I had been living in what I like to call external validation mode. And that all caught up to me. My perfect storm ultimately was bad jet lag. I had an unknown virus, and that ended up giving me a 2-day fever. And then my EBV reactivated. And some of you might know that as glandular fever or mono. And then I also had continuous mold mycotoxin exposure. And I wouldn't find out about that actually for 2 more years. And then, of course, accumulated stress buildup, working crazy hours at my job. So then I'd ultimately collapsed in an airport in May 2016. They put me on the do not fly list. And when I was cleared to fly back, I continued trying to push through work and physical activity for 6 weeks. And I had up and down symptoms then. But then 6 weeks later, my body slammed on the brakes, what seemed like for good, and I was no longer able to dance.
That sounds, we all have our unique stories, but so much of that sounds like so much of what we hear from other people. So much of that resonates with my own. It seems like that combo, that perfect storm of overexerting, not taking care of yourself, pushing too hard, some different environmental and viral things, a blow to the body, and it just shuts down. And it
Yeah,
feels like it's out of nowhere, but it
yeah,
really
and
isn't.
it did feel like it came out of nowhere, but at the same time, I blew through all the red flags and I didn't rest. It was really strange to me because exertion in the past, I thought that's how you build up your strength. And with this mystery illness, which I called it at the time my mystery illness, I would crash at a cellular level if I went too far. And I'd also experience all the symptoms: brain fog, chest pressure, the flare up of flu like symptoms. It was like my body was stuck in day 1 of the flu times 10. And I had the stamina of a 90-year-old, and I could gauge this because I lived next door to a retirement home, and the 85-year-olds would outpace me as I shuffled to my street corner to get some sunlight. And I'd find out much later I had a classic case of viral onset myalgic encephalomyelitis, but unfortunately, none of my early doctors were familiar with it. They believed infections have a beginning and an end, and they told me I'd get better. So I told them I'm struggling to breathe. They handed me an inhaler. I was like, my body can't digest certain foods anymore. And they gave me heartburn pills, and they were just like, eat a balanced diet.
So symptoms, attacking symptoms, one at a time, and Something simple that you should be able to
Yeah,
fix.
exactly. But I spent a lot of energy dragging myself to all those doctors.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to tell me what was wrong with me and give me something to fix it. And then I ended up in the ER several times with alarming symptoms. And then when that didn't give me answers, like most of most of us, I spent thousands of hours Googling for answers. I learned all about the leaky gut, the microbiome, antivirals, and my family made fun of me. They were like, Elizabeth needs to get a hobby and stop reading about bacteria on the internet. Yeah. But I didn't have a real diagnosis except post-viral fatigue, and they said it would go away on its own. And since I was an overachiever and a tough cookie, I just pushed through, try to cling on, and that's why I'd ultimately lose my health, eventually my job, and I blew through my entire $60,000 in life savings in the first 6 months. And I spent my money on supplements. I personally feel like I funded numerous vacations for Jeff Bezos, his family, his bodyguards from all the supplements I tried on Amazon, hoping one of them was going to fix me. I spent money on organic living, doctor bills, and I even spent money on an organic couch, which was very expensive.
Sorry, I need to hear what an organic couch is. I've never heard of that before.
It's like cotton and stuff instead of the polyurethane because of
Okay.
off-gassing, and I was
Uh,
struggling to breathe, so I was like, "What could it be? Is my couch killing me?" No clue. I literally tried to do everything to get better, and of course, that makes you kind of seem like a nut to people observing this, but I really wanted my life back, and it's funny when you're trying to do everything to get your life back, you look a little crazy. So, and I actually once paid $2,000 for a medical mystery website where a panel of doctors would solve your case. But I didn't have the stamina to answer the questions because
oh,
looking at the screen and typing in the answers was just too much for my brain. And if you have ME, you know what that feels like. So, yeah.
it's interesting because I could see how people on the outside would definitely think, "What is going on? What is she doing?" But I bet you anyone who has this illness, it doesn't even faze them. They absolutely get it because it's a level of desperation, I think, that people have to experience to understand what it's like. And why would you spend all this money? And why? But when you get your
When
life taken away
when you
from you, you'll
can't
do
walk
anything to
your
get it
street
back.
corner, when you can't walk to your street corner, you will do anything. This is really embarrassing. Since I was reading about the microbiome and I had severe IBS, and I remember my husband saying he had never been sick in his life except when he was 18, and he had never been sick in his life ever again. So I was like, this guy must have a really healthy microbiome. And I was like, how can I steal his poo so I can give myself a fecal transplant so I can get better so I can walk again? And this was what I thought. It didn't even faze me because I was so desperate to do anything to get my life back.
I love it. This is the gift of ad lib.
Like, don't tell the poo story.
I can relate. And I read about this later on down the line. And if I would have had a healthy poo specimen that I could have implanted, I would have done it. I think there's actually some studies to back this. I don't think you're crazy.
Okay. So you probably are wanting to know what my level of functionality was. And for the most part, I was around 25%. And I consider that moderate ME/CFS. But I was typically recovering from a crash a third of the time, which took me to 15% or even 1% at times. And
Wow.
so I call it purgatory. I was fluctuating between glimpses of real life and bodily hell, though I did have a stage of severe ME and severe IBS. And I called that the second dimension of hell. Um, yeah. And so during the first 2.5 years, my general radius was my house and the expensive corner grocery store 2 blocks away. The cheaper one was out of my radius. So another
And
reason I lost all my money.
it's interesting that you mentioned about the seniors that you gauged yourself against or the people in their 80s, because I also it's just interesting how much of other people's stories resonate, even things that you think have to be unique. I had a neighbor who lived next door, and I used to sit in my living room and look out the window, and he was perpetually on his driveway, and he did not look healthy at all. He was extremely overweight. He looked like he was maybe part of some sort of biker gang. He was out with his motorcycle. He forever had a whiskey in his hand and a cigarette, but he just seemed to be so much healthier than me and to be able to do so much more. And it's one, sad, and it's two, infuriating. you know
Yeah, I mean, my parents are extremely active 67-year-olds, and my mom would call me and she'd be like, just walked 18 holes today.
yeah.
And it's kind of, it was really sad. I'm super glad for my mom that she was able to walk 18 holes, and then go to Zumba. And then I remember that day I had to take a lift 2 blocks back from the grocery store.
Yeah, I know that, fair has nothing to do with it, but it's hard not to think in those moments, like, this is just so unfair. I'm doing everything I'm doing to take care of myself, and everyone is just blowing by me. But yeah, it's just
Yeah.
interesting to hear the people we measure ourselves against and how we all probably have similar stories of not being able to keep up with people that clearly we feel we should be able to.
But overall, my recovery journey, it wasn't anything close to linear until my final upward trajectory. And that didn't begin until January 2019 when all the pieces finally came together. But I did still have a couple bumps then too, but I'm on the other side, fully recovered, and I'm grateful to share how I got out.
That is so wonderful. So when you started to make your more upward trajectory out of this, how long had you been sick at that point?
2.5 years.
So thank you so much for sharing that journey of yours. That sounds incredibly difficult and incredibly stressful. So I want to know, and I'm sure everyone wants to know, what were some of the main things that you finally found that got you out of this?
Yeah, so it was boiled down to 3 general principles, and one was eating what my body could best metabolize. The second was removing sources of stress that were blocking me from healing, like toxins, mental stress, physical exertion. And the last one was nudging my body into a healing state. I really had to take my body to a calmer environment inside and out for it to heal. So taking my gut to calmer waters was the first thing I did. So I didn't know what was going on. Why was my body reacting to certain foods and I had no energy? So I said, was it reactivating EBV, which my doctor said was a false positive? Did I have Lyme, which they didn't test for? Could it be a leaky gut? So I Googled these things to see, what do you eat for all these things? But diet really seemed like it was one thing I can control, and it seemed like it would have an effect. So I spent hundreds of hours researching online and thousands of dollars on supplements, trying them out. And then I had some detours until I finally converged on a diet and the supplements that would help me get from around 15% to at least 30%. So early on, I eliminated caffeine, sugar, alcohol, and gluten. And it wasn't because I'm just have this amazing willpower. It was because it was horrific, the reactions to these once loved things. And I was also very good at drinking water, but because one of my issues was extreme Moses in the desert thirst.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was because of the mold, I think, but that I later find. But I learned other foods would affect me a day or two after. So yeah. So after a few stumbling blocks, I ultimately found a paleo diet. I call it paleo. It's paleo, right? Okay. Paleo.
You call it whatever you want to.
Years, but can't pronounce it. Helpful during. So I found that helpful during most of my recovery. So that's no grains, no dairy, and no beans. And I ate mostly meat, fish, and lots of low glycemic fruit and vegetables. And for me, I found out cutting nuts was helpful too during my recovery. And so, like most people, in the beginning, I ate all organic and I used a water purifier, just one you can buy off Amazon. It's called Zero Water. It was good. And for people, I know organic produce can be more expensive. So EWG.org has a list of foods, conventional foods, which are known to have less pesticide. And also one other tip is to use baking soda, which can remove some of those pesticides.
So while you were doing this, I of course definitely want to hear more, but I'm curious, how much of this was you directed, your own research and your own program, or was some of this coming from a doctor or some program you were following?
No, it was all me. My doctors told me to eat toast and bananas when I complained about these gut issues. And they were just like, the balanced diet, everyone should be eating off the food pyramid at all times. And so I went online. It's very stressful because there's different diets that gurus recommend on Instagram, the functional blogs. So I really had to listen to my body, but the blog that aligned most with what I was experiencing was Dr. Chris Kresser. And I would later find out 26 months in from my MECFS specialist who ran extensive tests and found the mold. She said that what I was eating was actually what she generally recommends for people with mold. So I'm like, oh. And she said that was one of the reasons I was doing better than most of her mold cases, even though I had 100 times the safe limit of that mold. It's like, okay, maybe my diet was helping and eating ridiculous amounts of garlic. I was scaring away Robert Pattinson. Like, I ate so much garlic. And my family made fun of me for it, but it was helping me, I thought, or I felt.
Do you know where the mold toxicity came from? Do you know where the exposure was?
105-year-old home. And then the doctors told me it wasn't mold because I didn't have watery eyes. It turns out that I had an inflammatory response to mold, not an allergic one. And I had a severe inflammatory response to an extreme amount of mold in my house. But it was the kind that grows on dust and is generally invisible, and it wasn't the more known black mold. It was still a toxic mold, and I had a lot of it in my body.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you can test for that because it's something that I worried about as well. And I had my home inspected for mold. I did so much of what you did and probably spent almost as much money, and they couldn't find anything. But I would imagine that they can't even test for all kinds of mold in your home.
That's true. In air samples, it's just what's in the air. It's not like what's on your counter surfaces and things like that. It's just what's in the air at that moment. But the test that I took that confirmed it was a mycotoxin panel from a company called Great Plains Lab. And the reason my doctor ran this was because I had a test called the C4A inflammation test. And when that's positive, when that's extremely high, she said most of the time that's due to mold.
Okay.
But if you can't afford a test, seeing these specialists are expensive. And I almost think I knew when it rained, which is when the mold spore is active state. When it rains, like I would become almost paralyzed. And it's very interesting because when I got these results, I was like shocked because I was like, the doctor said it couldn't be mold because I didn't have watery eyes, but I knew my body was completely struggling when it rained, and it just seemed so obvious looking back.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so hard to disregard the experts. You think that they must know, but I think that's one thing that we've all learned through this process of having this illness is that you really do become the expert on your own body, and really that you always were. So if you feel worse when it rains, if you're worse in the winter, if you feel worse every time you hang out with Aunt Laura, there's something there, whether it's stress or mold or lack of vitamin D or something's happening. So
found out I had that as well, low vitamin D. Yeah, so I found getting more sunlight to be helpful and eating more vitamin D rich foods.
So what did you end up doing to deal with all that mold?
Yeah, I had to move to a healthier, sunnier home.
Wow.
And I had to get it out of my body. I just spent a lot of time in the sauna. I also found out I had elevated mercury. So I got my dental amalgams removed because they were corroded from years of teeth grinding. So the sauna really helped me with that. And so, but getting the mold out of my body and moving, it really helped, but it didn't fix me. Tiny amounts of mold exposure in my daily life, mental stress, and overexertion still caused me to crash. I had to do more to ultimately heal. And another thing that helped me get out of severe IBS and the stage when I had severe ME was eating warm cooked foods. So this was advice from my local acupuncturist who specializes in traditional Chinese medicine. And she identified low spleen qi. And I was like, but what about the enzymes? And she was like, if your spleen doesn't have even an energy to heat up the food to break it down, then you're not going to get energy from it. And this is also a principle of Ayurveda. So when I replaced my giant arugula salads with warm cooked vegetables, meat, soup, and soups, my digestion, mind, and energy improved. And so Lauren mentioned this in her interview with you, and I also dealt with parasites through her herbs, and I did the herbs and the supplements to address those deficiencies, support my immune system, like microbiome, my mitochondria. And yeah, supplements and herbs were helpful, especially in the beginning, but the boost the mitochondria and kill the bad stuff mode wasn't fully healing me.
Okay, so it sounds like diet, healing your gut, these things definitely got you part of the way there and played part of your role in recovery, but it wasn't everything. So what else? What else was helping you out?
I think like most of us who recover, the next part for me to heal was to really pull back. And I like to say we don't swing an arm when it's broken. We protect it, we rest it, we strengthen it, and then we come back in the ring. I wish I had known that early on, but I'll share something I did to take it easy. And one thing I did, I learned the hard way many times, was to set healthy boundaries, or as I like to call them, conditions to facilitate thriving, which included learning to say bye. Those three letters I could not say for 32 years of my life. I learned to say bye and I learned to set my own pace.
I thought for sure you were going to say, I learned to say no. I was so ready for that. I'm like, wait, what?
Oh,
What's she
no
talking
was
about?
too, but bye, just
Bye as in goodbye?
goodbye, to say goodbye. Yes, to say
Okay.
goodbye. Well,
Meaning you needed to cut some people out of your life, or you just needed to shorten your interactions with
no,
people to
shorten my
keep the
interaction. Yeah,
Okay.
if it was like talking to a friend, talking to
Mhm.
someone on the phone, or if I needed to leave early. And I typically would last about 45 minutes, but sometimes I'd, you know, push myself through. The conversation was going. I didn't want to just leave. But on the times I was able to see people, I would save up my energy for that. And then because I put so much hope on this one event, I would tend to push through because I'm like, oh, well, I saved up all my energy for this. I need to like really stay here till the end. And I learned that nope, I need to leave when I'm still feeling good. And I really just had to let go of embarrassment, feeling like I was being an inconvenience, like asking for the airport wheelchair assist. If I could cut a line to avoid waiting in the cold, to cancel appointments, to bring my own food to friends' houses, to ask friends to come see me instead, or to ask them to leave when they were there. All of those are real examples of things I didn't do, but I eventually got it right. And I learned to stop explaining and justifying why and just doing the thing without asking permission, like taking the Uber 2 blocks or just up and leaving a social activity ridiculously early. I actually even made myself a permission slip that freed me from having to make excuses when it came to my health that I found helpful.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it was an imaginary one.
You could just visualize it in your head when you knew it was time to go. Like, I
Yeah,
have
it was like,
permission.
that's when I called it use your permission slip, use your permission slip. And it was this idea that I could up and leave without an excuse because I had this permission slip. Yeah, another thing was learning to ask for help and having it. My husband, I mean, that was key. So he had to take over most chores, and I had to learn that my health was more important than my fear of being a burden and leaving a dirty pot in the sink. And though my husband was usually at work or traveling, but when he was there, he was really helpful with giving me a physical boost, and he would tush push me up our stairs. So he would literally reach under my crotch and lift me up my stairs because that's how I would be able to get up them. Or back push me. He'd put his hand on my lower back to push me up our steep sidewalk incline to catch some sunlight on our street corner. So that was really helpful to go places. And of course, his emotional and financial support was vital since I lost all my money. Reducing mental stress was key for me. I had to quit my job, and I should have immediately done that, but I held on for so long part-time. I don't know what I was doing. It was a real identity thing with me, I think, because I felt like I needed to show my contribution, and I didn't want to, even though my husband had a stable income, I didn't want to feel like a burden, but it was really necessary. And it's just ironic that trying to not lose money was how so many of us lost everything. It's like no one shows you a chart of how much money I'd eventually lose because I was afraid of being seen as lazy.
Yeah, when you do the long-term math, it's a bit scary.
It's ridiculous how much money
Yeah. And I also think, I know this isn't the case for everybody, but I know at least for me, the people around me adjusted and people really were supportive and really came through. And, people just want you to take care of yourself. And if you're not doing it, exactly like you said, then in the long term, you're going to be useless for them as well anyways. It's an investment in the future of your relationship.
Exactly. Yes.
As well as yourself.
Taking it easy is key for this condition to be able to do more in the future. But a lot of us, or a lot of people, seem to get stuck in the trap trying to not be a burden, and then you end up being a burden. But one other thing I wanted to mention, so another thing I did to really take it easy was letting go of all the energy I was wasting on seeking external validation. And so when I shifted my focus from seeking validation to what is going to help me heal, things changed. And I'm talking about like proving how bad ME/CFS is, proving my contribution, thinking what I'd say to doctors who got it wrong. All these things weren't helping me heal. So that was one thing too. And I realized I needed to stop side projects and even my involvement with ME/CFS activism after these caused some major setbacks. And I learned I had to choose my health over my empathetic desire to save everyone. So I had to really learn about myself first.
And it's really hard, it's like you're in a sinking ship and everyone around you is sinking too, and it feels selfish and horrible.
Exactly. You feel like people, exactly, that you phrased that exactly what I felt.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it feels horrible to leave people around you sinking and drowning, but they're just pulling you down as well. You're pulling each other down. No one's getting anywhere.
I tried to save everyone in my neighborhood with ME/CFS. It ultimately, yes, set my progress back. I do care about the cause, but I just, then at that point in my recovery, it wasn't the right time.
It's such an important message, and I'm sure you see it too. I see it on Instagram and all over. People are struggling with this because they want to help each other out, but they also just don't have the energy to do it. And I suspect that's why so many of us come back after, once we've recovered, and we do things like this, and we do videos, and we do blogs, and because we've always wanted to help out, but for so much of that time we didn't have the ability to do it. So, and it's a good thing for people to know that are still struggling, that not helping now doesn't mean that you'll never be able to. It just means that it's probably not your time yet. You need to get yourself in order first, get yourself strong, and then you have the rest of your life. The rest of your life.
Yeah, and I found even asking friends and loved ones to not talk about disease or drama or politics, because of my extreme empathetic nature, I would kind of carry that, and avoiding that stuff was really helpful for reducing emotional and mental exertion for me. Last, I found it essential for me to reduce digital overstimulation. And I unplugged for the first 2 hours in the morning and last 2 hours at night. I removed all my phone notifications except texts. And I still today sleep with my phone in another room. But I also stopped watching all action shows, anything high adrenaline, violence. Those things just activate our fight or flight chemicals. And I replaced them with things like funny books, podcasts, comedies, and I even got into really cheesy family shows. And I took this really seriously. I even fast forwarded through the intense part of baking. During the countdown, they're like, are the biscuits going to come out of the oven in time? Was there going to be a soggy bottom? So with that intensity, I'm just like, no, I'm just going to stick to like the making the batter and then the judging. And I cut out all cable news. My brain couldn't, that wasn't really an option though. My brain couldn't handle the bright lights, the contention, the ticker tape. But I'd eventually cut out all TV news and also constantly checking internet news. Like I used to check New York Times, Daily Mail to see what the celebrities were up to, Twitter to see what people are saying. And now, none of it. And it's still impossible not to know what's going on because if you check Facebook even once a day, you can tell. And if I'm ever curious about the news, I'll ask my calm husband, and his news reports are hilarious. It's a better way to live. He's a Belgian robotics professor, so his take on just the whole situation in America is quite interesting. He knows a lot about the Kardashians. But yeah, I also stopped arguing online, all of it. And I stopped focusing on the wrongs of the world and I went inwards. In a book, I have it here called The Vortex and The Power of Now. These two books really made me rethink these former reactive tendencies of mine, which added nothing of value to the world except stress for me. After reading these books, I knew I couldn't fully heal if my body was stuck in a fight. And so I almost had to learn to surrender. And I don't mean giving up my power, I don't mean giving up hope, but it was accepting where my body was with a mentality that I could one day heal.
I'm so glad, Liz, that you brought this up. I think it's great because we're talking so much more and more about mental health because what I was hearing from a lot of that was just a really conscious, diligent approach to your mind, to your thoughts, to your reactions, your environment, just daily mental health care, which obviously I think we all get in theory is really important. And we're talking more and more about mental health. And we talk about how important it is to reach out for help when you need it and deal with things like anxiety and depression. But I want us to get to a point where we are thinking about it the same way we think about health, because we've gotten with health to a place where we're talking about preventative medicine. Don't put out fires. Not like saying, oh, if you have a heart attack, you should get medical attention, or if you have diabetes, it's time to do something. We're talking to people about doing things before you get to that point. So I don't know that we're all thinking about mental health in the same way. Yes, it's great that we're going to get counseling and do different things when we are struggling with anxiety and depression and all those other things. But how many people every day put work into making themselves mentally strong, having those boundaries, having those thought processes, having those tools to help them cope with life instead of waiting until things get bad and you have to ask for help. I think most of us say, or at least think, that we appreciate the importance of mental health. But when it comes to chronic PT syndrome or ME recovery, I'm not sure that everyone still fully is. And I see that even just on my channel, because I think it's such a big part of my recovery. And so many people like yourself share the same thing. Virtually everyone I talk to say that they really had to work hard on that component of things, of stress, and how all of that was impacting their recovery. But even just looking at the videos that I have, because I put out quite a few on mental health, and they are by far the least watched videos. People bypass all of those. They want to see exercise, they want to see diet, they want to see supplements, things like that.
Exactly. This is going to sound silly, but I think it might help people get the importance of mental health. So when you watch a sexy video, if a guy or if someone watches a sexy video online, blood will go to certain places. And just by imagining that, if the thoughts in your mind are thinking about going over through the trauma loops, that's going to create stress chemicals. Just like watching a sexy video, changes the hormones in your body. And for me, when you have that crash and you can't do anything except, stare at the cracks in your ceiling, and you feel terrible. 90% of my thoughts were, who's to blame, what I should have done to prevent this, the conditions of my childhood that contributed to this, how I could have prevented my perfect storm, all those things. And to be able to, get out of that mode, which only creates added stress. And this is a condition where we don't have the proper ability to recover from stress. So if we can show ourselves some self-love and self-compassion, we can avoid adding all that extra stress in our minds and ultimately our bodies by replacing those thoughts with some more, compassionate thoughts. Yeah, so these books helped me in that, but also I saw a mindset coach just for 6 sessions, and it was really helpful. She gave me this worksheet, and just filling out this worksheet, just filling the blanks to these questions, it helped me identify 2 of my emotional triggers, which was linked to some crashes. My crashes were caused by physical exertion, a triggering food, mental overstimulation. She helped me identify the emotional component of it as well. The body doesn't differentiate sources of stress when it comes to what it can recover from, it seems, or at least my body didn't. And my mindset coach also helped me learn to put my health first. She literally hypnotized me. I am the type of person who puts my health first, and I felt amazing after this session, but it's not like magically I'm this me first person.
Yeah.
It took a few more epiphanies for all that to sink in. But again, the best pacing strategy, the best diet isn't going to help unless you have that willingness to always put yourself first.
I agree with all of that.
And so speaking of pacing strategies, generally I did find it helpful to break things up, to stay within my health zone. And breaking things up also helped with my lymph flow. And that's the fluid that transports our white blood cells, which are the ninjas of our immune system, and rely on muscle contractions to flow. So for me, sitting or lying in one spot was out of the question. Long car rides, sitting in the movies, they weren't my jam, to put it nicely. So I couldn't even wear a bra. The lymph nodes under my arms were so swollen. So I found it helpful not just to get things done without going over my energy levels, but it was helpful to support my lymph flow. And some things I did in that regard was also some deep breathing on bad days, gentle restorative stretches on better days. And then in my upward trajectory, when things started to improve, going on longer walks and, lifting my arms up and down here and there.
So it sounds like a lot of what you've been doing is supporting your body's own ability to heal and thrive on its own. So what other things did you do to help your body heal in this process?
Yeah, so like most people, I did meditation. Our brains play a big role in helping us recover from exertion. Another thing I did, and you did this too, was improve my sleep, where most of our repair happens.
Yes.
I learned. So I literally tried everything, the blackout blinds, like I did everything. And my sleep was terrible, terrible. But then I read this book. I'm like,
Sleep smarter.
I feel like I'm a Bible salesman with this book. I'm like, read this book, everyone.
I haven't read that one. I am going to read that one.
But it really helped me get into a healthy circadian rhythm, and it was a game changer. So my bedtime's now what it was in 5th grade, 9:30, and I get sunlight in the morning, and I do a bunch of other things. But yeah, I'm catching the most restorative hours of our natural sleep cycle. And I love your motto that you said, sleep at
all costs. Yeah.
Sleep at all costs. Yeah.
It really has to be, because exactly like you said, it's virtually impossible to replicate the restoration and the repair and the healing that happens while you're sleeping. It is just incredible. And to try and heal without it, I found I was just getting nowhere. So
Exactly. Yeah. Getting on that early bedtime and not waiting up for my husband. He actually sleeps in a different room.
I think that's a big one for a lot of us. Just even sleeping next to our partner can be really tough. Yeah, and me, I can't handle the movement and the noise so I mean now sometimes we do sleep in the same room, but still not always. But I was so resistant to embrace this because I think it feels
Yeah,
bad, like it
I
means
know.
something
Yeah.
bad about my
It seems like we're
relationship.
one of those weird 50s couples, but we have a great relationship.
Yeah, and
You
it
just,
really makes everything better if you get the
yeah,
sleep that you need. Yeah, I
exactly.
resisted it to the point for a while at first because I didn't want to sleep in a separate room. I put a blow-up air mattress on the floor, and I thought nights where I can't sleep, I'll just move to the blow-up mattress. But then the blow-up
Yeah.
mattress just became my bed because I couldn't sleep every single night. So every single night I was sleeping on the floor of our bedroom, thinking that it was always temporary and this was the last week that it was
You
going to
slept
happen.
on the blow up mattress. I'd be like, you go on the. Oh my
Well,
God.
he's out cold. He has no clue what's going, and I'm tossing and turning. So eventually, I had to admit defeat and
Yeah.
officially
Well,
move. And this is when I was full blown in recovery mode, and just moved into the spare bedroom and
yeah.
thought, just get over yourself, Raylan. Just do what you got to do.
But yeah, so on a brighter note, another thing that in addition to sleep, that I found was to support healing was just cultivating joy. And you talk a lot about this in your channel, and I wanted to just, yeah, say I agree. And I also have a daily gratitude practice, and I began to write like loving cards to friends. And then I began to receive them, even better ones back, and just surrounding myself with recovery inspiration. So if you're watching this and you're here, you're doing something good. Yeah.
I love the notes to friends. It feels like it's meant to be a selfless thing, but it really is just such a great feeling to be able to be there for other people. Yeah.
And so the final piece of the puzzle for me for healing was healing my brain's fight or flight response through neuroplasticity. And the neuroplasticity program I did, it was called DNRS, the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. And it's actually much more simple than it sounds. And it just really involved using healthy visualizations to calm the overactive part of my brain and generate new healthy neural pathways. And it really explained how the science behind it too, which I found helpful, about how mold, other pathogens, and trauma can injure the brain, and that drives chronic illness. And it really clicked for me because I truly felt that my brain's fight or flight center was stuck on level 10. It's just, I had these crazy stress responses to the littlest things. I remember a writing class, an elective writing class I took. And it felt like this little writing class deadline was like a bear chasing me in the woods. So I knew something was wrong with my brain. And I started DNRS Christmas 2018. I had gone home every year of my adult life, but I decided, nope, I'm just going to go to the desert. It was a much shorter, calmer trip. I really unplugged, and I started this program, which I just stumbled across while I was there online. And I was actually coming out of a really bad crash and viral relapse then, and it had me back in a wheelchair. Yeah, and it really had noticeable effects for me. And when I came back to the rainy city, I was more resilient and I continued to improve. And 5 months later, I'd be able to dance again.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is really interesting, and thank you for bringing it up because I know nothing about this. Can you give me an example of what did this look like? What did this involve doing, this neuroplasticity? I don't know. I'm just having trouble visualizing
Yeah.
what
So there's
exactly
a
this looks like.
series of 10 steps. And the first are about calming your limbic system.
Okay.
And the last three, one of them stating your mantra, a
Okay.
healthy mantra. And I had a bunch of different ones. I am healthy and full of life. My body is regenerating and becoming stronger than ever. I said, a perfect state of health and calmness is within me, and I can always come back to it. And another one was, I know that miracles happen. They've happened to me in the past. They're happening right now. they happen to others, and they'll continue to happen for me in the future. So those were some of my mantras. But then for about 15 minutes further, I then go into my best memories where I'm feeling vibrant. And I then also make future visualizations come alive as well. So I had this one visualization, which I must have done 100 times, of I was paddleboarding with my best friend. I would imagine the water, the feel of my muscles, the feel of the sun. Yeah, and then on my honeymoon, I made it come alive. And in the visualization, I'm actually falling off my board a couple times, laughing at myself. But in the real thing, I actually got up on the first time, and it was easy, and I was one with the ocean, and the current was actually really strong paddling back, but I was stronger, and I just easily paddled back to shore. And I cried after, because you can think miracles happen to other people, and then in that moment I realized it happened to me, that I had been through hell, that I imagined I could be here, all the setbacks along the way, and that here I was on the other side, and I was just so grateful. So yeah, so I think that was a big moment for me when I knew I was recovered. And there was another moment too, and this is a lot sillier. So I mentioned that I would dance in front of the mirror every night. It's just this indulgent hobby of mine. And then for most of 3 years after initial rougher patch, I only really had the stamina to dad dance, shifting my weight like back and forth on each foot.
I've never heard that term before.
Yes, dad dancing. So there were a few times I fully Liz danced, but you can imagine what I had to do to prepare myself and what happened after. But to be able to shimmy again easily was like really a joyful achievement. Like I can shimmy again, and then I can like do my Bruce Springsteen arms. And I'm just so grateful to be able to like dance again, because for 3 years I couldn't really do my shimmy. I did some jazz hands to make up for it. So now I've kind of combined all these moves together, but I was able to fully dance at my wedding last July, and we did a choreographed dance to Tina Turner's Simply the Best, and it was amazing.
Oh, this is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this. You have just taken me on such an emotional roller coaster. I was from tears to laughing to sad to happy. It's just, and how incredible that you had all these visualizations for your life and all these things that you dreamt of doing. And what that must have felt like to actually be doing them. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, I'm just really grateful, and life is really so much sweeter on the other side of this. And I'm just really, really grateful. And that's why I wanted to, share my story about how I got out.
That really was truly moving, by the way. I had goosebumps head to toe. That's a story. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story. It's so informative and so inspiring. So I'm just so happy for you. It's just so amazing that you've been able to come out of this. Is there any sort of general advice that you would have for people that are going through this right now? Anything that you would want to tell them?
Yes, and that's create an environment for healing. And your environment is not just your home where you're living, but it's also what you surround yourself with, the media you consume, the people you surround yourself with, and is that supportive of healing? And I promised myself I wouldn't be one of those people who said they were grateful this ever happened. I said, Liz, don't forget how terrible this moment is. The excruciating discomfort, the boredom, the utter loneliness. And I would have asked for anything else besides this unimaginable condition to ultimately lead me to it. But this was the challenge that was given to me, and I had to lose everything to find my happiness and my true purpose. And now that I'm on the other side, life is sweeter. The life I was living It was living for the approval of others, seeing everything as a competition, in constant reactive mode, and I found joy. And all that boredom was good for my brain. When others are just on their phones, I literally stared at a hummingbird for 10 minutes today. And I'm truly happy, and that's all that matters. And I'm speaking my truth with love, to inspire others, and I'm collaborating with others in alignment like you, Raelan, to bring something good to this world. And I know my true resilience, and I know I have the tools to handle anything. I just want to say, all of us who fully recovered didn't recover by perfectly holding it all together. We all had to pick ourselves up from the last time we crashed. And if you're going through this, particularly those with severe ME, you're the strongest person in the world. And you're not broken, even if it feels that way. Researchers have found that ME is a block in the healing process after illness or injury. And I believe it's possible for anyone to remove these blocks and ultimately heal. And maybe others can guide you along the way to identify these blockers like they did for me. But just know that you are the person who gets to heal you. And I hope you find themes in our recovery stories, but know that your recovery story, just like ours, will have its own special element. Mm-hmm. And I was you once watching the recovery stories on YouTube. And I hope you'll be here one day sharing your story.
Thank you, Liz. That was perfectly put. Perfectly put.
Thank you, Raelan. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to share my story. I imagine myself sharing my story one day, and I'm here now. It's just really amazing. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, I'm so grateful just for the opportunity to put your story and your words out into the world. I think it's just so important and so powerful. And you have shared so many incredible things today. Like you said, even if those specific things won't be everyone else's exact path, there may be something in there that sparks an idea for someone. There may be something that helps, or maybe, like we did, we just need to connect and feel supported and feel inspired and feel hopeful. So I think what you've done here today is very brave. And I just really can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
So if people want to reach you, Liz, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at healwithlizc. And you can also find me at healwithliz.com. And I share recovery stories. I have an interview with Raelan on the blog. And I also share actionable tips, things that helped me and others recover. And that's my new mission in life. So yeah, I hope you check that out.
Great. And I will have all of this in the video description, of course. So please check it out. I'm sure Liz would love to hear from you, and I would as well. And for everybody watching, we'd love to hear from you here in the comments as well. So please share, a bit of your story, a bit of your experience, anything from this video that sounded, familiar from what you've gone through, or any thoughts or feedback you have on anything. Let's share our stories. Let's connect. Let's support one another. That's the reason we do all of this. And thank you so much for watching this video, for liking and commenting and subscribing and everything that you're doing to support what we're trying to do here to get more information out. And if you enjoyed this video, if you think it had value, please share it. You can share it on Facebook. There's tools below the screen where you can share it directly, or you can just copy paste the link, or you can share it on Instagram. Just take a screenshot and tag Liz, tag myself, and let us know what you think. Let's do what we can to support one another, and you just never know when something that you pass on is going to be really meaningful and really helpful for someone else. Thank you again, Liz, so much for being here.
Thank you, Raelan. It was a pleasure.
And thank you to everyone watching. And we've got more stories coming up, more interviews, more full recovery stories, and just all different sorts of stories coming up on this channel. So if you haven't already subscribed, now is the time to do it, and ring that little gray bell below the screen so you get the notifications when the videos come out, because I know you are not going to want to miss them. So that's all for today. Take care, everyone, and hope to see you in the next video.